Guys, ever since the Avengers Doomsday trailer has come out, there's been a very strange new discourse on Twitter and places like that where the conversation has shifted less from, you know, feeling as though the MCU was flying blind and didn't exactly have a plan and didn't know what they wanted to do, which is what people had been saying pretty much since like halfway through phase 4. It's now a conversation of, well, Doom doesn't need to be set up. How much setup is necessarily required for a character like this in a movie like this. And I kind of became aware of this conversation through a clip that I saw from John Campea, who's worked for Collider. So I'm going to play the clip, and then I'm going to kind of weigh in on what I think.
Me, the single greatest villain in cinematic history is Darth Vader. You did not need 3 movies building up Darth Vader before you made Star Wars A New Hope. You just had to have Vader. Hans Gruber is one of the greatest villains in cinematic history, played by the late, great Alan Rickman. Hans Gruber is one of the greatest villains in cinematic history. You did not need 2 or 3 movies building up Hans Gruber before bringing him in and making him one of the all-time greatest cinematic villains. You did not need build-up for it. I mean, just about any movie with a great villain, of which there have been many, you never needed build-up. If you need build-up, then you don't know how to write a good movie. If you can't write a great, compelling villain without having 2 or 3 movies of build-up, then you don't deserve to be a screenwriter.
I find that point. Okay, well, let's kind of go in order. The first thing that he's about is Darth Vader, and how in A New Hope you don't need 3 movies of build up to establish Vader as a villain. The fact of the matter is, Vader isn't really the main villain of A New Hope. It's Tarkin, as you can tell by the fact that Tarkin dies when the Death Star explodes, and Vader does not. And even with Vader, and with A New Hope in general, the film is so referential to stuff that hasn't happened on screen, stuff that happened way back in the past, and things that they don't give you context for. It's kind of a ridiculous point to make, especially when you look at the very next movie, Empire Strikes Back, which makes it clear that the main villain of Star Wars is not Darth Vader, it's the Emperor. It is Palpatine. So I think a better way to spin that is, what if Palpatine had been the villain of A New Hope? Would it have really worked the same? Well, it's hard to say because you're taking one movie out of a franchise and treating it as if it exists in a vacuum when it doesn't. You then use the example of Hans Gruber. How many people that are talking about Doomsday do you think have seen Die Hard? Anyway, sure, Hans Gruber works very well in the first Die Hard movie. Let's look at the third one about Simon Gruber, his brother. If we had just started there, and it was all this referential stuff about Hans and his relationship with John, and we never got to see any of that. Because the fact of the matter is, looking at Star Wars again, we exist in a world, all of that setup, that prequel trilogy of setup exists. So it's kind of impossible to divorce it from the original trilogy unless you were there at the time. John was. Most people who were talking about these movies probably weren't, right? I mean, for crying out loud, Return of the Jedi came out in 1983. You know, it's 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 ridiculous, and they're both bad examples because they're from original movies. They're not adaptations of something. They don't exist in this huge 30-film franchise. Let's look at how things are in the MCU. Strictly looking at Avengers movies, the first Avengers movie is about Loki. He doesn't need 3 movies of setup. He is the main villain of the first Thor movie, and the MacGuffin that he uses is the same MacGuffin from Captain America: First Avenger. Now, it probably helps to have seen The Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 1 and 2, because at that point, the level of commitment was too crazy. It's watching 5 movies over the course of 4 years. Most people can do that. Age of Ultron. Yes, Ultron is first mentioned and first appears in this movie. It's not like there's not things being set up for what comes after. You know, they have a post-credit scene for Thanos at the end of the first Avengers movie. It makes you think the next Avengers movie is going to be about Thanos, but oh, it's called Age of Ultron. That means we're playing the long game. We're going to do a slow burn before we get to Thanos. That movie plays a dual purpose. Yes, they're taking down Ultron, but they're also setting up the Infinity Stones and what they're for, right? Thanos doesn't need to have this huge, commanding presence looming over several movies. He has what, 3 appearances before Infinity War, and that is all he needs. Because in those 3 appearances, we see his face, we hear his name, we hear his voice, we get to see his characterization, we learn about the stranglehold that he has on the galaxy. And because we're dealing with the Infinity Stones, we know what he wants. Thanos is associated with one thing: the stones. Sure, he's part of stories that don't include the Infinity Stones, but that's not really what you go to Thanos for. You know, if Thanos is showing up in something, you're going to assume that the stones are not far behind. Doom is different. When you think of Doom, what do you associate him with? The Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four just appeared in the MCU in one movie last year. Doom had nothing to do with it. He appears in that movie for 5 seconds with his back to the camera, says nothing, does nothing. Right? So we are now forced to guess what his intentions are. We have to guess what he wants because he wasn't set up. I'm not saying that he needed to have a dozen appearances, but it's different because of the fact that there was a clear pivot from one focus to this one. They wanted to do Kang. They were setting Kang. Clearly at Marvel, they do think that setup is necessary for these big, huge event films. Avengers Age of Ultron was not an event film in the same way that Endgame was. Endgame was treated as a finale. This is being treated as like the first part of a finale. If Thanos had just shown up in Infinity War and they never said his name or anything like that, but you still have somebody like Drax or Gamora or Nebula, and they all hate Thanos as much as they do in that movie, but we've never heard the name before. We've never seen him before. We don't know what he did to these characters. It just doesn't work. And going further, there's so many characters in this movie: Gambit, Mystique, Ant-Man, Shang-Chi, that have no relationship to Doom that's worth talking about. Yes, he's from a, not from, but yes, he participates in a huge event story that has every hero in it. But that's different, okay? If it's like, sure, right? Everybody has probably had a hand at fighting Magneto at some point, but when you look at somebody like, I don't know, the Winter Soldier or Black Widow, do you think, oh man, can't wait to see them fight Magneto? You probably look at Black Widow and say, can't wait to see her fight Doctor Doom either. There's so much more here to justify. There's much more organic reason for the characters who were in Infinity War to care about Doctor Doom, or not Doctor Doom, about Thanos. And especially because it bleeds in so organically from the end of Ragnarok. We see that ship pulling up after they leave Asgard. We know what it means. Especially because of the fact that we know that Loki was working for Thanos in the first Avengers movie and he failed. Now that we know that he had been given an Infinity Stone by Thanos and he lost it, Thanos wants revenge. He wants payback. He wants it paid back in blood. So you feel that dread and you spend the next 6 months waiting for that payoff. There's nothing like that for Doom because we don't know what he wants yet. We don't know anything about what he wants yet. This movie is being treated as this huge event, this huge crossover special, this payoff, this finale to all these years of storytelling. But they were building up to something else, and we now have to ignore that and act like this was the plan from the get-go when we clearly know that it wasn't. Maybe setup isn't something that's always needed, but it's something that they do. It's something that they've been doing in the context of the MCU. They like to leave little breadcrumbs for you to follow. There is no trail of breadcrumbs for Doom. They have failed to hold up to the method of storytelling that they created, or rather helped to pioneer. So I'm going to tie you back into that last point that he makes of like, if you need however many movies of build up, then you're not a good screenwriter. Well, are we really expecting Avengers Doomsday to have the greatest script, especially because this movie is being headed by the Russo brothers? And the online perception of them has shifted a lot. People consider the Russos to be hacks, to be frauds, to be, you know, like massive haters of certain characters. Like they think that they don't like the Hulk and stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely precedent to feel as though the screenplay for Avengers Doomsday probably isn't going to be too tight anyway. I mean, what else have they made? 21 Bridges, which was not very good, and The Gray Man, which was also not very good. It seems like they can only make good movies when they're doing it for Marvel, and even then, they can only do it about half the time. So look, at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things, how much does it really matter that Doom doesn't have any build up? Not a whole lot. There's still a lot of intrigue for this movie. The trailer still got a whole bunch of views. I still did a reaction video for it. You can watch that at the end of this video probably. It's just a matter of, I don't think that the level of confidence that was there for Infinity War is still there. The reputation of the MCU as a whole brand has gone downhill significantly since this whole multiverse saga started, and I think that is working against this movie because it has not at any point ever felt like they've known what they were doing with the multiverse. It seems like every single movie has different rules. Like at the beginning of the trailer for Doomsday, we see what probably looks like an incursion. This would be the second mention of an incursion in the entire multiverse saga. The first would have been in Doctor Strange of the Multiverse of Madness. Well, none of the key players in that movie are in this one. There's no Strange, there's no Wanda, there's no America Chavez. There doesn't even seem to be a Wong. So it feels like there's no connective tissue there. The rules of the multiverse have operated very differently from one project to the next. You look at What If and the Guardians of the Multiverse. Why are there not several incursions being caused there? Why is America Chavez not causing incursions whenever she's in the wrong universe for too long? Why do we not see anything like that with Spider-Man No Way Home? Especially with the little piece of the symbiote being left behind. Is that good enough to cause an incursion? You know, what's really going on, especially what happens with the Void, because that's an alternate universe as well. Nobody's from that one. So why are universes not being torn apart? Maybe all of that will be addressed in Doomsday, but it's like, it's probably not going to, because they don't have time. That's another thing. People are wondering if there's even enough time in this movie to do everything that it says it's trying to do. I don't know. Obviously, I'm still gonna watch it because I want to be able to talk about it. Everybody's gonna be talking about this movie. I do not want to miss out. I'm gonna watch Dune first. I think a lot of people are gonna watch Dune first. Not to the point that Dune makes more money than Doomsday, because obviously it just won't. Because you're probably not gonna take your kids to Dune. But I don't know. I just feel like it's hard to be confident in this movie, hard to be optimistic, and it's hard to feel as though it's going to come together to be anything more than the sum of its parts. I could be entirely wrong. I just kind of wanted to talk about that. Maybe get your guys' opinion. Do you think it really matters that Doom hasn't had a whole lot of build up, or do you think that the quality of this film will be largely impacted by that fact? If it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad regardless. If it's going to be good, it's going to be good regardless. It won't have anything really to do with how much build up there's been to Doom specifically. It's just, for me, the Secret Wars comic ends with Doom having to be forced to acknowledge that Reed is better than him. And so that kind of like plays off of 50 years of a dynamic between Reed and Doom. And Reed didn't have anything to say in this Doomsday trailer. Reed does not mention Doom in the Fantastic Four movie. That whole story hinges on the relationship that those two characters have, and we've seen nothing like that. It's just it's tricky because we're talking about a villain who has a very distinct arch nemesis, and there's nothing being said about their relationship. But that's just what I think. That's all I got for you guys today. I'll see you later.